Welcome to a Bay Area Skeptics Skeptalk. My name is Jay Diamond, and we are Bay Area Skeptics. Founded in 1982 in the San Francisco Bay Area, we are the oldest regional skeptical organization in North America. We're skeptical, meaning that we believe in critical thinking, logic, and rational thought. It's that ideal of healthy skepticism, using inquiry and evidence to dispel irrational thinking in society. It's called scientific skepticism because we trust the scientific method, evidence-based thinking, and the innate societal value of civil discourse. In this edition, Carrie Ellen Sager discusses top 10 myths about homelessness. Recorded in Berkeley, California on December 14th, 2017, let me pass it on to Tucker Hyatt for her introduction.
Our speaker tonight is Carrie Ellen Sager, Senior Homelessness Coordinator at the Department of Health and Human Services in Marin County. She has a Juris Doctorate from American University's Washington College of Law and a Bachelor of Arts from Trinity College at the University of Toronto. Before moving to Marin County, Carrie worked on homeless issues for the San Francisco nonprofit law firm HomeBase. And before that, she worked on civil liberties at the ACLU in Washington, D.C. She was also once a board member of the Bay Area Skeptics, no doubt her greatest claim to fame. Homelessness is a major social problem in virtually every city of the U.S. today, and in many smaller communities. Misunderstandings and misconceptions abound in the important social science surrounding homelessness. Tonight, Carrie will help us better understand the myths of homelessness. Please welcome Carrie Ellen Sager.
Thank you for having me here. Thank you, Tucker, for that lovely introduction. So I'm here to talk to you today about how we can end homelessness using healing crystals. No, sorry. That's my one skeptics joke. Okay, so in the course of my work, I work as the Homelessness Program Coordinator for the County of Marin, which means I work on a systems level I work with homeless service providers, with city and county governments, with other services and programs to create a unified approach to ending homelessness. And as part of this work, I work with a lot of community members, I work with a lot of elected officials, and there are a lot of misconceptions about homelessness and about how to respond to homelessness that have come up. So that's basically the topic of my talk tonight, is what are these misconceptions and what is the reality? So number one, some people just want to be homeless. And so you're like, okay, why is she starting with something that is obviously true? Like there are some people out there who want to be homeless. There are people who are living out in the woods. You've got your hashtag van life millennials, living that romantic camper lifestyle. In Marin, we have a bunch of guys who live on boats because they believe that if you live on a boat, you're not subject to the laws of the United States. And so they're very happy in their homelessness, although they'll get very angry if you suggest that they're homeless. But when people say some people want to be homeless, what they're talking about generally is the people you see out on the street. People who are living in encampments, people who are panhandling, and they think, these people just want to be homeless, and, if you offer some people housing, they'll turn it down. So, it's not a totally unreasonable thing to think. This guy was offered housing. He said, no, I'm not interested. Leave me alone. So he must not want to be housed. So why would somebody do that? Why would somebody reject housing or shelter? So one reason is safety. If you offer somebody housing, you say, hey, great, we have this great housing facility. You can, come live here. And they say, I don't want to live there. There's some tough people there, I don't want to live with them. I don't want to be in the same place. I would rather take my chances out on the street. If there's crowding, people don't want roommates again. If it's a congregate living situation, it's a program that says you have to share an apartment with somebody. Roommates can be pretty tough to live with. I'm sure we've all experienced some roommate conflict in our lives if we live in a roommate situation. Now imagine if your roommate is somebody who was living on the street for 20 years and, is an alcoholic, and you're somebody who's trying to, you decided I want to turn my life around, I'm going to try sobriety. You're not going to want to live with somebody who's actively drinking. So there are, roommate conflicts, issues where this housing just seems like there are going to be personality clashes. People who aren't able to bring their pets. It's a huge issue. A lot of people out there have companion animals. The companion animals are this tremendous source of emotional comfort. And if you offer them housing, but it's in an apartment building where the landlord says there are no pets, they don't want to leave their pet behind. Like, they love their pet. I love my pets, I wouldn't want to leave them behind. Just as somebody who's, has a good rental history and has a verifiable income, finding a place that'll rent to somebody with pets for me is difficult. So imagine if you've got 2 evictions on your record and you're trying to come at this with a housing voucher from the housing authority. People have had previous bad experiences with the provider or with housing. This is a huge issue with people who have, I went and I stayed with agency X at their emergency shelter, at their homeless shelter, and I got kicked out. Like, they said I was hassling somebody. I wasn't hassling anybody. I don't know what they're talking about. I'm never going to work with them again. I don't trust them. I was housed for a while, but as a program, it said I had to be sober, and I don't want to be sober, or I tried to be sober and it didn't work out, and then they kicked me out. So why am I going to try it again? I'm just going to end up out on the streets again. Housing's in the wrong area. I don't want to live in Oakland. I want to live in Berkeley. You're telling me I have to live in Oakland? I don't want that. And people who see accepting help as weakness. This is that program's for crazy people. I'm not a crazy person argument. And so you might think, okay, well, those are all reasons you might not want housing, but if the alternative is being homeless, aren't all of those things still better than being homeless? And what we see with people who are experiencing homelessness is this cycle where you've got a person who's got a behavioral health issue. So the behavioral health issues are mental health issues, substance use issues, a combination of the two. These are people who can be difficult to serve. And when people are difficult to serve, a lot of times they'll fail out of programs, especially if the programs have high barriers. As they fail out of the programs, they become more distrustful of the programs, of the service providers. If they don't trust the service providers, then they don't seek help. They get worse. They become more difficult to serve. So it's not even like a self-perpetuating cycle. It's just a self-emphasizing cycle. It's a spiral rather than a cycle. But what providers generally find is that these are barriers to getting people into housing, but they're not a fundamental not wanting of housing. So with ongoing engagement, if you have a good engagement program, you work with the person, you try and help them find housing that they want. If you look at those concerns, and instead of saying hey, just deal with these concerns, it's better than being homeless, what you generally find is that that's not just a problem with getting them into that housing, it's a problem with creating that relationship. Because if you don't accept that people have preferences and reasonable things that they want out of their housing, and you don't work with them to get them those things, then why should they trust you for any of this? So with engagement, with good case management, and with a client-centered approach to housing, people do get housed, and people are for the most part, willing to accept housing. It takes more work than just saying, hey, are you interested in housing? That's when you get the no, leave me alone. So number 2, okay, so if people want to be housed, then it's super awesome when they get housed, right? And unfortunately, it really isn't. It turns out that going into housing can actually make things worse. So just as an example, there was a study of people placed in moderate and high need supportive housing in Toronto. So supportive housing is housing where you get not just a housing voucher where that pays for the cost of the housing, but you get supportive services that are designed to help you stabilize in that housing. And what this study found is that in the first 6 months of being housed, 40% of the participants had decreased community integration. So they're spending less time out in the community, they're having less social contact with other people. 30% experienced an increase in mental health severity, so their mental health issues got worse. And 28% experienced an increase in substance use problems. So the majority of people had improvements, which is what you would expect with somebody going into housing, but a pretty substantial number of people actually got worse in some way or another. And the reason for this is that when you're homeless, the way that you think changes. So the longer somebody is homeless, the better they become at being homeless. You make friends with other homeless people, they show you the ropes, they help you find things to help you get through the day. That helps you adapt to being homeless. And what's really an abnormal situation becomes normal for you. And once that happens, people enter survival mode. And what that means is that instead of thinking, okay, I don't want to be homeless, what do I need to do so that 3 months from now I'm not homeless? What people think is, what am I doing an hour from now? How am I getting breakfast? How am I getting lunch? Where am I going to sleep tonight? And that long-term planning is just so far down on sort of the hierarchy of needs that you're not able to, just not even able to sort of conceive of living like that. And so once you get put into housing, this way that you've been thinking, what do I do tonight? You're being asked to change that way of thinking entirely. And everything that seems normal to you is suddenly taken away from you. So, I'm used to hanging out in the park with my friends all day. Now I'm in this apartment all day, and I don't see my friends anymore. And you tell me I can't invite my friends over to my apartment because I'll get kicked out of my housing. I'm used to if I'm hungry, I just go to the soup kitchen and I get my food there. And now I have to go grocery shopping. I have to cook food. I have to clean my kitchen. I have to buy dish soap. There are all these steps. There's so many steps to daily living that people aren't used to doing. And it's this complete change it can be really overwhelming. So it's really there's this period where intense supportive services are needed to help people just even get used to the entire idea of being housed. Which is not to say that it's not good to get people housed, it definitely is, but it's really a sign of how important having those supportive services is, and why you can't just sort of say, all right, let's just house everybody and it'll be fine. Like, you need that supportive services portion as well, or else people are not going to be able to succeed, because it's such a change. Myth number 3. This is my favorite. This is the one I hear all the time. These people aren't from here. They're coming here for the services. Everywhere you go, you hear this. And it turns out we actually have data on this. And the way we have the data is that basically every county that gets federal homelessness funding, every 2 years has to do a complete census of everybody who's experiencing homelessness in that county. So that's the results for the most recent one, the 2017 one just came out. You may have seen articles about, homelessness rises nationwide because of the West Coast. Homelessness in Los Angeles went up 25% since 2015. Homelessness in Alameda County went up 40% since 2015. homelessness in the rest of the country went down. Go West Coast. We always get to be special. But so because we have to do these surveys, counties, there's certain things counties have to ask about. So they have to ask about, how long you've been homeless, basic demographics, gender, race, ethnicity. But because they're already asking these survey questions, most counties will put in some additional questions for data that they are interested in. And because we get this question so often, that why should we put any resources towards this? We should save our resources for people who are from here. People ask, where were you living when you became homeless? And what we found pretty much across the entire United States is 70 to 80% of people were living in the county where they are homeless when they became homeless. So if you're homeless in Marin County, 72% of the people who were homeless in Marin County were living in Marin when they became homeless. San Francisco is 69%, Alameda County is 82%, Sonoma is 79%, Los Angeles is 70%, Las Vegas is 77%, Seattle 77%. In New Jersey, across the entire state, it's 95%. This is also what we see sort of statewide. If you look at, if you look back up at Marin, 72% of the people were living in Marin when they became homeless. Another 20% or so were living somewhere else in California. So this idea that everybody's just coming from the East Coast for our beautiful weather is really not. People may be coming to the West Coast for beautiful weather, but they did it before they became homeless. And if you think about it, this makes sense, right? Like when people become homeless, they're not planning on being homeless for a long time. Again, with the exception of the van life millennials. People, it's, I lost my housing, but this is short term, I'm just going to get back on my feet. So of course you stay in a place where you're familiar with the area, where your friends and family are, where your support networks are. And then if you stay homeless for a long period of time, then you're not going to have the resources to go somewhere else to make this big cross-country move. Plus, you've established basically a second set of where everything is in the county where you're homeless. You know how to get free food, and you know how to where different services are, and you've made this new network of other people who are experiencing homelessness. So it makes sense that people would stay in one place, and so the data really bears that out. Actually, I was talking to a guy from the West Virginia Balance of State Continuum of Care. So this is the part of West Virginia that isn't the big city. So, the poorest, most rural, like Appalachian coal country. And he was saying that one of the complaints he's always hearing is people are just coming here for the services. So this idea that, people are going to tiny rural West Virginia towns because their homeless services are so great. Like this idea is everywhere, and he said they have the exact same thing. About 80% of the people in rural West Virginia were in rural West Virginia when they became homeless. So, which does mean that there are a few people going there, probably not for the services, probably because they know somebody. But there are people going from elsewhere into rural West Virginia. So myth number 4. Okay, so people aren't coming here for the services, but if we start housing people, then they're going to come here. And this one, especially in the Bay Area, we hear why should Marin try and end homelessness in Marin? Then San Francisco is just going to send people to Marin, and Sonoma is going to send people down to Marin. And the easiest way to disprove this myth is to look at counties that have done this, that have started saying, no, we're going to end homelessness in our county. What happened? So, example number 1 is Bergen County, New Jersey. And if you're like me, you're from the West Coast, you're not familiar with your East Coast geography, you can't read the tiny little map. Bergen County, New Jersey is right across the river from a little town called New York City. New York City has the largest homeless population in the United States. There are 60,000 people in New York City who are homeless. And Bergen County, New Jersey said, we're going to end chronic homelessness. So chronic homelessness is people, there's a very complicated technical definition, but basically it's people who've been homeless for a year or more and have some sort of disabling condition that makes it, it's an ongoing disabling condition that makes it a little bit harder for them to operate in the world. And so what Bergen County, New Jersey did is they invested heavily in permanent housing and getting people permanently housed, and they, over the course of about 2 or 3 years, they got down to what's called functional zero, which is when you are housing people more quickly than people are becoming homeless, to the point where you can say specifically, this is when homelessness is going to end. And so, you'll notice the numbers, the actual, she's my pointer. The numbers that we're talking about, you can't read, that's pretty small. That's a 35, so 33 people, 35 people. It's a small number, but that also is kind of illustrative, right? Like, they're right across the street, across the river from New York City, but people have not been flocking there. There are only 35 chronically homeless people, and they managed to get those people housed, and nobody went across the river to say, like, I want to be housed, let me head over there. Another example is Montgomery County, Maryland, right outside Washington, D.C. And Montgomery County, again, decided we want to end chronic homelessness. And so they haven't ended it yet, but they basically cut it in half. They've gone from about 230 chronically homeless people down to 100. This is just over the course of a year. So they really made a concentrated effort, devoted a lot of resources, and made this huge impact on their chronically homeless numbers. And if you look sort of countrywide, nobody's has ended homelessness for all populations, but 4 states and 54 communities have announced an end to veteran homelessness. And again, no like huge influx of veterans saying, I'm going to go to Connecticut, man. If I go to Connecticut, I can get housed. I'm going to go to New Orleans. If I go to New Orleans, I'm going to get housed. Plus, I can live in New Orleans. Sounds great. So there are the fact that this concern that if we build it, they will come, just isn't borne out by the places that are actually doing it. Number 5, fine, you can't just put a junkie in a house. This is a real quote from somebody who I can't name because it's somebody I work with. And this is the idea that we can't house somebody until they deal with their issues, right? Like, if you put somebody who's, an active meth user in a house, there's no way they're going to be able to stay housed. And in fact, what it turns out, that's exactly what you do, and in fact, that is the best way to get somebody's homelessness to end, is to just put them right into housing, with something called housing first. So this is up here we've got sort of the traditional model of homeless services. So you start down here, you're homeless, you move from homelessness into an emergency shelter. So your emergency shelter, maybe you have to be sober to be in the emergency shelter, you can't bring your pet. If you do okay in the emergency shelter, then you can graduate to transitional housing. And transitional housing is up to 2 years where you're living in usually a congregate facility, so with a bunch of other people, maybe in dorms, maybe at your own unit. And while you're there, you're learning sort of your life skills. You're learning how to grocery shop, and you're getting job training, and you're sort of learning how to do all these things you need to live independently. And if you do okay in transitional housing, then you get to go into permanent housing. Then you succeeded. Then you become housed. But what that does is that creates a whole bunch of places where people can fail and where people can fall back into homelessness. So if your goal is to get people housed, if your goal is to get the most vulnerable, highest needs people housed, this system is just going to put up way too many barriers. So Housing First basically says, skip all of that, just go from being homeless into a permanent house. it doesn't make sense to live in transitional housing and to learn how to do your grocery shopping and your cooking there. Do your grocery shopping and your cooking in the kitchen where you're going to be doing your grocery shopping and cooking for the rest of for as long as you stay in that unit. Do your job training. Learn how to take the bus to see your doctor using the bus route that you're going to keep taking because you get to stay in this apartment. And the Housing First is one of sort of the most well-studied interventions for homelessness. So this is just one example. This was a 225-participant study. They were randomly assigned to receive either housing where they had to receive treatment and be sober, or Housing First. And what they found is that the Housing First group, they got housing earlier, they remained stably housed at about the same rate, and they recorded like a higher perceived choice. The utilization of substance abuse treatment was higher with the group where treatment was required, which makes sense, but there wasn't actually a higher amount of substance use. So both groups used continued substance use at about the same rates. It was just some got more treatment that didn't really have any effect. So that's substance use. For psychiatric issues, there's another study that found people who were housed in a Housing First model increased their antipsychotic adherence to medication at a higher rate than people who were in other types of housing programs. In the City of Toronto study about Housing First, they found that people who were in a Housing First program had a 49% decrease in alcohol use, 17% quit altogether, 74% had a decrease in drug use, 33% quit altogether. There's a 28% decrease in health clinic use, 40% decrease in emergency room use, 25% decrease in hospital use, 38% decrease in ambulance use. Those last ones, or if you're talking to an elected official, those are the ones they want to hear. Like, you save so much money with Housing First. And so, you have all these outcomes, and Housing First doesn't require, the definition of Housing First is that you get housing and you're not required to participate in any kind of program. So there's no, we'll give you housing, but you have to do the sobriety treatment. You can get housing, but you have to do this job training program. You can have housing, but you have to meet with your case manager every week. If somebody wants to, they can refuse to see their case manager entirely. Now, it's pretty hard to keep somebody housed if they completely refuse to meet with their case manager. This is something where you really have to, you have to work on, again, building those client relationships and hopefully getting the client to work with you. But it's not required, and that's really the key. Again, this is all around client choice. In San Mateo, so this is a local project, there's a project called the Vendome, and they found of the sort of first initial classes they put in the Vendome, there's a 99% reduction of police contacts and an 85% drop in medical costs. So these were the most severe, chronically homeless, very visible in downtown San Mateo, and they put them into this Housing First program, and just like the impact on emergency services just plummeted. So myth number 6, we can't solve homelessness because there's not enough housing. I'm not here to claim there's not a housing crisis. That would be crazy. For one thing, I just said that we had a 40% increase in homelessness over the last 2 years. So saying there's not a housing crisis would be absurd. And this housing crisis is increasing the homelessness epidemic. But there's a certain, why even bother? Like, what can we do, right? Like, why? It's so hard to get housing. Nobody's going to accept a voucher. They can just get, $8,000 a month from some tech bro. So, like, what's even the point? Why are we even talking about this when we're not going to be able to get people housed? And it's there are ways to get people housed. You know, there are certain, you sometimes have to put in some extra resources, you sometimes have to sort of think creatively, but there are a lot of creative housing solutions that even in a really tight market can help get people housed. So in Marin, we have a pretty similar market to a lot of the Bay Area. Extremely high rental prices. Our rental rates are pretty close to San Francisco's. Marin is 80% open land, dedicated open space and agricultural land, so we can't build anything. The dirtiest word you can use in Marin is development. That's a non-starter. But we've been able to get incredible landlord buy-in and get a whole bunch of people housed who are, you wouldn't think we would be able to get housed. You think a landlord would run screaming from. And there are a couple ways we've done this. So one thing is increasing rent payments. So the rental rate for vouchers, for Section 8 vouchers or for homelessness vouchers that you get from the federal government is set federally, and it's based on something called the fair market rent. And the fair market rent goes up every year. But it does not go up every year at the same rate that rents in the Bay Area go up every year. So something that we did in Marin is we basically said, you were telling us that we can pay $1,500 for a one-bedroom apartment. That's not going to get us anything. That's not, the slumlords are laughing at us. There's nothing you can get for $1,500 in Marin. So we're going to do a study. We're going to study what all of the rents, what actual rents are. We're going to submit all this evidence to you, and it worked. And so the government increased our rent payment so that now, I think a one-bedroom for Marin we can pay something like $2,200 a month, which makes us competitive. You can actually match the rents that the private market can offer. Another thing is landlord incentives. So what are the things that a landlord is worried about, and how do you respond to those? So Section 8 vouchers don't come with any money for deposits. If you've got somebody who's, if they're working poor, maybe they can scrape together, the money for this deposit if they're going to get their rent paid for sometimes, not always. But what we did is we said, okay, we're going to have a deposit fund. We're going to be able to provide deposits. And what's more, we're going to be able, if somebody's got bad credit, or if somebody's got bad rental history, we're going to provide double deposits for those people. We're going to have a 24-hour landlord helpline. If you house somebody and they start causing trouble, you can call this hotline and we can send somebody out and we can help resolve this issue. Which, if you've got somebody on the private market and it turns out that they're, some party guy and they're having parties late at night with their friends, there's nobody you can call for that. But if it's somebody who's being housed with one of these vouchers, you can call this hotline. Having somebody who's a dedicated housing locator, one of the craziest things that projects serving people who are experiencing homelessness do is they say, all right, you're the case manager, go help this person find an apartment. So you've got, a case manager, a social worker. There are not a lot of real estate classes when you're getting a social work degree. So why would we, you wouldn't ask a realtor, this guy's having a mental break, you should handle that. So why would we ask a social worker to, negotiate with landlords? So what we've done is we've hired somebody whose entire job is going to landlords saying, hey, this is why you should accept these clients. Here's this whole landlord partnership program we have. Here's the business case for accepting this person. Not let me appeal to your humanity. The landlords whose humanity you can appeal to are already working with the providers. We need more landlords. So we need landlords who are that's great, but I got to pay the bills. To say, all right, let me tell you how you can pay the bills better by accepting these vouchers than you would just accepting somebody on the open market. Live-in aid. So this is something we're doing in Marin that I am not aware of anybody else doing. So we're we're pretty proud of it, which is basically if you've got somebody whose needs are so severe that they need to have somebody who lives with them. For federal vouchers, you can get an additional bedroom for that live-in aid. So you can get like a 2-bedroom apartment if you've got somebody who needs a caretaker. And if the person doesn't have a caretaker, something that we've been doing is saying, all right, well, you know, Bob needs a caretaker. What about Joe? Joe's a cool guy who's been experiencing homelessness for 5 years, but like he's pretty high capacity. He's got, he's a smart guy. He's a nice guy, and he's doing well enough that he's not going to be prioritized for our permanent housing. And so we don't actually have any way to house Joe. But what if we house Joe with Bob? And Bob and Joe, maybe they're already hanging out, maybe they're already friends. We can basically house 2 people on one voucher, including people who who wouldn't qualify for their own voucher, and just sort of get a little extra housing in there. And like obviously the voucher then costs more money, but the sort of per person cost of the 2-bedroom is much lower than two 1-bedrooms and 2 studios. So, those are just a few things. There are also master leasing is something that I forgot to put on the slide. This is, okay, I'm not going to rent to this person who's been homeless for 10 years and has been evicted twice, but I'll rent to St. Vincent de Paul. St. Vincent de Paul is an agency that's got some deep pockets. If something happens to my apartment, they'll handle it. So St. Vincent de Paul gets the lease, and then they sublease to the person with the voucher. That's something we've been doing. So there are a bunch of different ways to get these sort of housing units. Even though, yes, overall there are not enough housing units. There's no need to sort of throw your hands up. Okay, so number 7. This was a great talk. Good job, Carrie. You're all convinced. So what about the things that they've been doing in Utah? Let's do that. That's supposed to be really good, right? You've probably seen headlines like that. The surprisingly simple way Utah solves chronic homelessness and saved millions. Utah found a brilliantly effective solution for homelessness. The shockingly simple, surprisingly cost-effective way to end homelessness. Why aren't more cities using it? So this is the part of my talk where this is just my own personal pet peeve, which is, why aren't more cities using it? Literally every city is using it. The thing that Utah did was housing first, which I just described. It didn't start in Utah. Utah's doing an okay job of it. They're not saying Utah's terrible. They're not doing the best job in the whole country of it. But somehow they just got out on this Utah has invented the solution to homelessness. Good job, Utah! Yay! And so anytime somebody brings up Utah, it's that's great, but we're doing that already. And so this is not, the problem with this is not just okay, but you're ignoring the work that the entire rest of the country is doing. The problem is if you say, well, Utah's doing housing first and they've been able to reduce chronic homelessness, the immediate reaction in the Bay Area is, well, Utah's nothing like here. Utah has so much land, they've got so much housing, we can't do that. Utah, you can house somebody for $400 a month. Here it costs, like I said, $2,200 a month for your renting a 1-bedroom. So this idea that housing first is a Utah solution means that people shut down on the idea of doing housing first in the Bay Area. When in fact, as the Vendome shows, as other Bay Area programs show, it works perfectly well in the Bay Area too. So next time somebody's Utah, just be all right, that's great, but our local providers are doing the same thing. They're doing a great job. Okay, so number 8. So with housing first, people will get sober, they'll get a job, and they'll go on to live independently, right? This is the goal of housing people who are homeless is, getting them to just be regular people. And so first of all, housing first is a philosophy that can be applied to any type of homeless intervention. So that's simply true for some people, people who need sort of if you're homeless for economic reasons, you need just sort of, light touch services, some closet assistance. Absolutely, Housing First program can help them move them towards independence. But for people who have really high service needs, who've been homeless for a long time, there's, independence isn't necessarily the goal, and that's okay. So if anybody here has ever donated to a homelessness nonprofit, you've probably gotten some sort of, mailing that talks about this amazing transformation that somebody has had, this rags to riches. Here's Sally, and Sally has been homeless for. Does anybody here named Sally? I always feel bad when I use names like I'm accidentally going to use somebody's name. Apologies to any Bobs too. So Sally's been homeless for 10 years, and she's she was drinking heavily, and but now she's joined our program, and she's reunited with her estranged child, and she's got a job, and she's saving up to buy her first house, and this is an amazing story. And it's maybe Sally's got a thing talking about this program changed my life and turned everything around. And so I don't blame any program that uses something like this, because that's an amazing story, and they should be proud of how they helped Sally, and Sally should be proud of her transformation. But they also stories like this mean one of two things. Either that program isn't serving the hardest to serve, or they're using the statistical outlier as a representative of all of their clients. The goal of Housing First is to keep somebody housed. And if somebody's been homeless for a really long time, has severe substance use issues, has severe mental health issues, that they're not necessarily going to move into this to be a Sally. So if we look at the effects of chronic alcoholism, you've got if you've been drinking a significant amount for a really long time, basically it eats holes in your brain. We have a lot of people in Marin who have alcohol-induced dementia. And alcohol-induced dementia looks like old age-induced dementia. You've got incontinence. You've got complete loss of short-term memory. People, can't they can't understand abstract concepts. They can't. They have trouble with sort of spatial orientation. And there are definitely ways you can work with somebody who has these issues to adapt to the situation, but it's brain damage essentially. And this isn't necessarily somebody. If you've got somebody who has no short-term memory, you're not going to be able to train them to go to their job every morning and do their work, and then come home and have a normal life. If you look at effects and the Office of National Drug Control Policy, they estimate about 2/3 of people who experience homelessness have a primary substance use disorder. So those aren't all necessarily chronic alcoholics or chronic drug users, but large.
What does primary substance abuse disorder mean?
Thank you. That was actually something I meant to say at the beginning. Is I use I've been trying to define all my jargon as I go, but I can definitely slip into it. So primary substance use disorder means that, so substance use disorder is, if you're using substances in a way that has a negative impact on your life, it's primary if that is essentially the source of most of your problems. It's a little sort of wonky where you can have somebody, if you've got somebody who's got a severe mental illness and a substance use disorder, if they're at a substance use disorder program, that the substance use disorder will be primary. If they're in a mental health program, the mental health issue will be primary. So this is not to say that the absolute worst problem that 2/3 of people have is a substance use issue, but it's a severe substance use issue, basically. Thank you for asking for clarification. So traumatic brain injury is another thing. So most studies show that 40 to 50% of people experiencing homelessness have some level of traumatic brain injury. And traumatic brain injury, again, if you had a brain injury that this can be, a severe concussion, it can be some sort of blow to the head. And the long-term effects, you can have memory problems, impulsiveness, difficulty reading and writing, confusion, distractibility, aggression, depression. You guys heard of Phineas Gage? This is the famous story, the guy who gets a railroad tied through his brain and has just a complete personality shift. Obviously that's a very severe example of a traumatic brain injury, but that's what it can do. And so, you can lose the ability to react to things the way you or I would. So people make just really poor decisions, and it's not that they're making poor decisions because they're bad people. They're making poor decisions because they literally cannot do anything else. It is how their brain works, and so people shouldn't be punished for making poor decisions. And so what housing first, effective housing first in practice can be. Okay, so Sally was drinking every day, and we've had this great effect with Sally. She is now drinking a case of beer every day, and she's not drinking mouthwash. So, this is great. This is a victory. We've got Sally. We've got Sally, and she's going to the park to smoke meth with her friends. This is awesome. Sally is not bringing her friends back to smoke meth in her apartment, which would jeopardize her housing. So these are legitimately good outcomes, and these can be outcomes that are incredibly hard to get. If you talk to caseworkers, they're working with Sally every day. Be like, all right, I know it's raining out, but again, we really want to keep your housing, so we really need you to not bring your friends in here to smoke meth because you're going to lose your housing. We really, let's talk about how we can set boundaries. So this is really hard work, and I think it needs to be appreciated as hard work and as a success, even if smoking meth in the park doesn't seem like a great outcome. Especially, again, this is one of those things where when you're talking to elected officials, you're not like, Mr. Mayor, we promise we're going to have Sally smoking meth out in the park every day, and so she's going to stay housed. It's going to be great. But that's a victory. All right, number 9. What about tiny homes? Tiny homes sound great. And I think the first thing to say when we're talking about tiny homes is, what is a tiny home? So are we talking about this like cute little cottage, it's really cozy, it seems really nice? Or are we talking about this, which is essentially a wooden box? And people use these terms interchangeably. This picture is from Los Angeles, where there was an article about how the police were, tearing down tiny homes and not letting people live in tiny homes. And in fact, what happened was that the police said, "Oh my God, this is an enormous health risk." These are little houses. They have no sanitation. They have no ventilation. If somebody gets if there's like a fire or something, somebody can't get out of there. Some places, if there's a fire, might sound like alarmism, but in this state, everything is on fire most of the time. So it's a legitimate concern. People. So when we're talking about tiny houses, I'm going to assume we're talking about the nice kind, because I'm hoping we can all just sort of agree without too much discussion that people who are experiencing homelessness still need basic dignity and to live in a place that's safe. The one other thing I'll say is, one of the things people often say about the little box type of tiny houses is isn't that better than sleeping on the streets? And maybe it is. Tent is also better than sleeping on the streets, but do we really want to, do we want 10 cities to be our response to homelessness, or do we want housing to be our response to homelessness? So, if we're looking at cute little, nice tiny houses, I think in some places, a cute little tiny house actually would work well, But I think when we're talking about the Bay Area, we have to think about resources. And the thing that we have the least of in the Bay Area is land. If you look at some tiny house villages that exist, or some sort of housing solutions that exist, the Community First Village in Austin, Texas has it's about 140 units, a mixture of tiny homes and RVs. It's on 27 acres. And they have little gardens, and they have community kitchens, and it's, very nice setup. The Palms in Santa Rosa is a converted motel. That's 104 units. They basically took each motel room, gave it a little sort of kitchenette, gave everybody a microwave, and a little microwave cookbook, and a mini fridge, and created these sort of mini studio apartments. That's 104 units on 6 acres. There is some additional room. They want to put some additional units in there. Mercy Housing Mission Creek is in San Francisco. This is a 6-story building. It's got 140 units of affordable senior housing, some of which is for seniors who were experiencing homelessness. And that's on a 35,000 square foot parcel, so that's 0.8 acres. So you've got basically 14 times the amount of land for these microhomes and RVs as you do in Mercy Housing. Mercy Housing is a beautiful, I should have included a picture, it's a beautiful place. Like, it's well designed, it's, they got legitimate real architects, so it's a nice building. It's a thing that you wouldn't mind living next to. So it's not like, you just have to have these terrible boxy apartments, or like this little village. But you can have a very attractive apartment building, and have a much more efficient use of space. So what about micro apartments? Berkeley is flirting with micro apartments. San Francisco was doing it for a while. So this would sort of say, okay, we're going to, order these little tiny apartments and stack them all up, and basically create an apartment building, but using these micro units instead of sort of a traditional apartment building to save some money. And the answer to that is really it depends. So if you're going to have tiny units, you have to make sure that they conform to all the sort of livability requirements that we would have for any sort of tiny unit that we're making for the general market. There are disability issues. You want to make sure that you don't have a little entryway that's 14 inches wide. You want to make sure that it's habitable. You need to keep in mind, depending on what population you're talking about, that living in a tiny unit has some sort of additional burdens to it. If you have to fold down your bed every morning, and then you have to make your bed and you have to fold your bed up, it's not a huge deal for most people. But if there's somebody who's, again, we talked about the stress of moving into housing for the first time in a long time. You're like, here's some more stuff you have to keep in mind. Here's some more steps you have to take. You're potentially creating additional stress. And then finally, if you have trauma-informed design, this is really important. So there was a study of, San Francisco has a lot of SROs, single-room occupancy units, which are, you've got a little room that may or may not have a bathroom, may or may not have a little kitchenette. They compared the outcomes of people in 2 different SROs in San Francisco. People who were living in an old, it used to be just like a residential hotel, but they converted it to homeless housing. It's old, it's dirty, it's like the bathrooms had, needles and blood in them, just really a disgusting place. And then compared that to a new building that it was clean, it had private bathrooms for each unit. In the old unit, there was a 30% housing retention rate. So within I think it was within a year, only 30% of the people who were living there at the beginning of the year were still living there. And this is with supportive services. So that was with case managers coming and trying to help people work through their issues. In the new units, it was a 70% housing retention rate, which is pretty close to sort of the goal for permanent supportive housing, which is permanent housing with supportive services, is about 80%. That's sort of the federal goal that we all shoot for. So there's this huge difference just based on the quality of the units. Okay, myth number 10, you tell me. So I talked for a long time, but hopefully we have a little bit of time for questions.
I live here in Berkeley in a unit about 200 square feet. And it's, you can't have dinner parties, but you have a little bathroom and you have a little kitchen. And, if you can't spend $2,200 a month, which, I'm glad you're doing that for the homeless people, but I can't do that, and that's how you have to live. And I saw this show about, I think it was Hong Kong, these people that live in these, it's basically a bed with some shelves. And I would think anything would be that, lets people lock their stuff somewhere and sleep where they aren't going to get kicked or robbed or anything in the middle of the night would be a lot better than, having a nap on the concrete, which,
Yeah, so I think this ties into a couple of different things that I talked about. So one of them is that, trying to bring people into care who are reluctant to accept help. In some cases, they actually might be more receptive to those little boxes than they would be to a program because it's their little box, right? They have that ownership. But they're really, the health concerns of that are actually significant. You may have heard right now there's a hepatitis A outbreak in San Diego among the homeless population. It's been traveling up the coast. Everybody in the Bay Area has been aggressively immunizing all the people experiencing homelessness around here. And if you think about a box like that, I mentioned people with alcohol-induced dementia and how that can lead to incontinence. Imagine you have a box like that and you've got an incontinent person in it. That's not a box you can clean out pretty well. So then you've got, the amount of sort of bacteria and issues that can sort of form in there are that can be pretty significant. Talking about a little, 200 square foot unit, for sure. I think like I said, I have no problem with micro apartments as long as they, meet sort of the basic habitability standards that somebody might need. But I think, we need to think of people. We need to not sort of go, well, what's sort of the minimum amount that we can give to each person in order to make things 5% better for them, because that's going to end up with people not having improved outcomes. It's actually, I wish I should have something that would have been really good for me to include here that I did not include, so apologies. Is Mercy Housing, which built that San Francisco project that I talked about. They actually did a study about sort of outcomes, not just in really gross, dirty units versus nice, clean, new units, but just attractive units versus not attractive units. And they found that people actually had better health outcomes just in an architecturally attractive unit. So there are these improved health outcomes from having a nice place to live, even outside of everything else, even outside of the case management. So I think, if we want to talk about housing people who have really high needs, the quality of what we're putting them in is something we have to think about. I do understand the sort of well, why do they get a super nice thing? Well, a lot of people in the Bay Area are sort of struggling to afford things. And ideally we improve things for everybody, but right now I think the focus is people who are going to die on the streets, basically, and how do we keep that from happening?
I'm trying to get my head around 140 units on 8/10 of an acre, all on one floor?
No, it's a 6-story.
Oh.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a 6-story building. So it's a medium rise, low rise. I don't know where the cutoff is. Sort of a medium rise apartment building.
Okay. Second question is there any place for homeless to be housed with families?
Yeah, so there are a couple different things. So one, we have some programs that are specific to we being the general homelessness response community, both Marin and in other counties. There's sort of family housing programs. And it's like any other housing program for people experiencing homelessness. There are dedicated sort of single-site buildings that have a bunch of different units that homeless families can live in. And then there are also voucher-based programs. So you can get a voucher and you can rent a multi-bedroom apartment or a small house maybe. Those are a little tougher to find. So there's definitely is. I talk a lot about chronic homelessness because we're required federally, and I think also just by our sense of morals, to focus on the most vulnerable. And right now, at least in Marin, we define most vulnerable as who's going to die. I think you can make a lot of arguments about families with children. Obviously they're really vulnerable, and you want to get families with children housed so you don't have multi-generational homelessness. And I'm hoping that we'll get to the point where we can have an argument that's okay, well, who's is it the families with children? Is it domestic violence victims? Is it people who are mentally ill? And right now it's really who's going to die. But there are programs for, and there are chronically homeless families. There are families who've been homeless for a really long time who have these same issues. So I don't want to say, suggest that chronic homelessness and family homelessness are two completely separate categories. But there are definitely family homelessness projects.
Actually, that a homeless person or family being taken in by a family.
Oh, you mean so a family would essentially adopt a person? I think there are a few programs like that. I think usually what you see that with is homeless youth, where it's sort of especially if you have a young person who's aged out of foster care or who's run away from home. They're sort of you can live with a family. That family will sort of help you, provide you with the support that you don't have. I'm not aware of any programs like that for sort of the general population. I think if you're talking about chronic homelessness, that'd be a huge ask, is to ask somebody to take in somebody who's been homeless for 20 years and is actually using substances. So the only sort of really official programs I know are for youth. But I'm sure there are people who if they have an extra bedroom and they know somebody, a friend of a friend is down on their luck, and there's a lot of informally, definitely.
Hey, great. I have a clarification on one of your slides.
Yeah.
After you were comparing the two strategies, the traditional graduated system of permanent housing and housing first, you were mentioning the benefits of housing first versus the traditional system. And at the bottom, I think you had mentioned that there was no difference between the two retention rates.
Oh, did I say that? That sounds wrong. There was probably a higher retention. I think, let me look at the slide. Thank you for that clarification. If I said that, that was wrong. Remain stably housed. So I guess I didn't write down whether it was a higher or lower retention rate. I would assume, just based on other housing first studies, I would assume that it's higher retention, because that tends to be what you see in housing first.
Okay, this is a clarification.
Yeah, thank you.
When you try to house the homeless, at least in our area, I'm not sure about Marin, but we find that the homeless have a tremendous amount of stuff. I guess I have two questions. What do you ask people to do with all that stuff? And second, are there any studies about what the stuff they have is and where they get it from and so on?
I don't know about any studies. I definitely, anecdotally, I know from our case managers in Marin that hoarding is a huge issue. Even people who don't already have a ton of stuff, they just move into housing and they start accumulating stuff really rapidly. I think sort of the strategies for that would you have to have somebody who does case management. You know, I don't do direct client services, so I don't want to try and claim any expertise in that area. I think that's part of case management is, you know, do you work with somebody to get rid of that stuff? Do you say, all right, we need to create a solution. You get this, you know, SSI check every month. What if we take $40 and get you, or $100 and get you a storage locker somewhere for your stuff? So I think that's sort of a person by person thing that you have to respond to. It's definitely a problem, I know, especially because sometimes people already have stuff. There are issues with bed bugs. You don't want to move bed bugs into an apartment. That's a great way to never get that landlord to rent you anything ever again. So I don't know if that helps at all.
You mentioned 40% increase in the homeless population just recently. Is there something you can point to specifically in terms of government policy or society changed recently?
So that was the last 2 years. So the count is required every 2 years. So that was 2015 to 2017. And I think it's entirely the housing market. The housing, in terms of government supports, you know, on a federal level, things have been pretty static. There have been a lot of sort of best practices that are required by the federal government, and they actually are best practices. That hasn't slid to, like, you know, the best practices to require everybody to, you know, embrace Christianity, or the best practices to deport all the immigrants or anything. You know, we haven't seen any of that so far.
It's primarily housing prices going up.
I think so, yeah, and I think that's what you see so much in the West Coast more than other places, because our housing has just skyrocketed so much that people are losing their housing at a tremendous rate.
Section 8, Live in Aid program you mentioned, is that statewide, or is that a Marin County enhanced to the regular Section 8?
That's something we're doing in Marin. So it's just our housing authority is we have an amazing housing authority, and they work with us. Another thing we do is we get IHSS, so in-home supportive services workers, so that you can basically, the county will pay somebody to come and help somebody out with their activities of daily living if they need that. So we can sometimes repair those. So not only does the person get to live with the other person, they can get paid to do it. Sorry, health worker. But yeah, that's something that could happen statewide. Like, it's the ability to have a live-in aid that's a federal allowance. So anybody could do that. Any either a homeless voucher or a Section 8 voucher. Those all would allow it in terms of the federal regulations.
So this is a statewide program that any housing authority can offer?
Yeah, yes.
Carrie, so as a couple of your proof points, you use studies out of Toronto, and I was wondering why use a Canadian study, and if there are replicated studies in the United States. Obviously, there are some social nets in Canada we don't have here.
Sure, yeah.
Even among states, there's such a radical difference in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so Toronto, I think in general, just in large cities, you see more studies. It's a lot easier to get like a really high quality study with, 300 participants when you can have a program with 300 participants. We definitely don't have any 300 participant studies in Marin. And I think they probably don't have any 40 participant studies in Humboldt, So Toronto's a big city, so I think that Toronto also was one of the earlier communities to adopt housing first. So you can see more of it there. But yeah, I mean, we've seen some in New York. A lot of the original housing first research came out of New York City. Where again, you could have huge sample sizes in New York City. But yeah, there's a variety. You do see it in the United States.
Please join me in thanking Carrie Sager for learning about homelessness.
That brings us to the end of this Skep Talk. If you'd like to find out more about Bay Area Skeptics, our speaker series, or meetups, please go to our website, baskeptics.org. There, you can get on our mailing list, find out more about our Facebook group, or our Twitter feed. Theme music was composed, performed, and recorded by the amazing Joey Fabian, with Max Miller on trumpet at the Tomato Farm in Menlo Park, California. Views expressed in this Skep Talk are those of the speakers alone and may not express the views of Bay Area Skeptics. This recording is released under a Creative Commons license. Thank you for listening to this Bay Area Skeptics Skep